You're calling from a 775 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Reverend Aaron from Punks for Progress.
Hey, what's going on?
Not a whole lot. I wanted to talk to you. I'm so glad that you're actually hosting, Michael.
Oh.
Because I want to talk about deplatforming a little bit.
Okay.
Because I got to hang up with this issue.
Okay.
So I should say I don't have a real, strong stance on it either way, although I am leaning more towards deplatforming of fascism being a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to kind of, before we get into it, point out that there's a difference between what me and my comrades and others did over the last year or two in Berkeley in organizing counter demonstrations against like Ben Shapiro and Milo's so-called Free Speech Week. I don't see those as the same thing, and they get lumped into the deplatforming argument a lot.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you can elaborate, but I think protest is part of the same process of free speech, which I actually believe in pretty strongly. So I agree with you.
Excellent. So I'm glad we sort of established that.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other side of it, so Kyle Kalinske just recently put up a video where he's really adamant about the sort of slippery slope argument of deplatforming fascism, ultimately hurting us, right?
Yep.
And I'm open to this argument. Now, I have a small platform. We don't ask for money. My income is not reliant on it, so I don't have as much, flesh in the game as people like you or Kyle do. Okay.
Right.
But I haven't seen the evidence yet. So Kyle cites It's Going Down, which is a fantastic media outlet if people want to check out true anarchist critique and perspective. They're amazing. It's just going down.
But I listen to them all the time.
Pulled down. Yeah, they're incredible. And they've even done stuff for our platform, and they're just amazing for the community. And they were piled on, I don't know, year and a half or so ago by alt-righters because they were doing such a great job of supporting Antifa, and they got pulled down off Patreon. Now, I don't know if they've been reestablished or not, but this is the example that Kyle uses as the slippery slope if we're going to be bringing down, Sargon and, InfoWars and all these other people. And I don't see that connection. And I know that you are definitely very hesitant and skeptical of any type of deplatforming. And so I really, and most of the time that you've brought it up on the show, Michael, you're kind of like, look, this is kind of how I see it. I don't want to get into it, bam, and then you're kind of out. And I'm interested in.
I don't really want to get into it. Bam, I'm out. Okay. All right. Well, I do have two points I'll make on this, but first, I genuinely want to ask you. I mean, because I feel like it's. How do you not see the connection there? Right. Like to me, the connection is really linear. I can answer that pretty easily
it's
linear. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, the premise for why in this situation It's Going Down would have had their issue is a dishonest premise. It wasn't based on their actual activity and things that they were espousing. It was that so many right-wingers had piled on and lied about their messaging.
I'm not making.
So on the converse,
I'm not making a moral.
I know.
But let me just take it here for a second, right? So.
Sure.
I am not ever going to trust Patreon or Twitter or any of these platforms. And some of them might have better organizational cultures than others. So whatever, we can make some distinctions potentially. But I am not for a second going to trust the nuance and disaggregating abilities of any of these companies to make the distinction you're talking about. So stipulate that I agree with you as a moral claim, though, Sargon and It's Going Down are totally different moral propositions. But the process by which a skittish company that wants to avoid controversy and will make a business decision to avoid it, and its broader implications on these crowd-funded platforms, it's a very direct link there. So turnabout is going to be fair play. So I don't. So that's what I mean. I'm not making any
So I
type
see.
of actual.
Right. No, I completely
There's no
understand.
actual
And so
equivalency. I'm talking
well,
about these
actually,
companies and how they operate.
so if I understand you correctly, it's you're saying, okay, people like Sargon and Lauren Southern and these other people who've been deplatformed for really gross behavior,
Particularly
is bad for their
Laura,
business model.
Right.
Right? I mean, we want them brought down because we see that they have a real-time influence on a lot of ignorant minds that end up electing, a big giant orange Cheeto, right? And so it has real-time effects in the world. So that's why I'm into deplatform, because it terrifies me that their message gets out to people.
Yeah,
So here are my other. Let me just and then I'll just throw it out because I'll
Okay.
answer what you're saying, and then everybody will jump in on this because I know there's a lot of thoughts on this.
Sure.
So, and part of it, I just want to hear what everybody has to say one at a time because it's important, and I don't know all the answers, obviously, and I want to learn. But okay, so
Me
there's
too.
my broader. Okay, so the broader thing, and this is let's like kind of put it into three buckets. So my first one is just the business of these platforms and what you're the tendencies you're creating. So as an example, one conversation I had many years ago, but it was a really smart sort of distinction, and this is much less serious, but it was like the whole college, and this was actually a left-wing critique of comedians complaining about colleges. And the point was, though, is like, it isn't that there's like leftist or subversive comedy getting sponsored by college campuses. It's that all of these campus activity committees, as one might expect from the type of student that would want to be in a campus activity community, no offense, but you know what I'm saying, is to book performers that aren't going to offend anybody and aren't going to do anything that might disrupt anybody's sensibility. And I think that potentially could be the trend line on some of these platforms. And I do think that if, controversy is your concern, and again, I'm thinking about profit-making companies that are not making obvious moral and political distinctions, that is going to have implications for not only fascists, but also socialists and anarchists. Okay, so that's like the business concern. The other concerns I have are, I think that there is sometimes a culture on the left that has gone so quickly to that position versus actually like winning fights, whether they're, figurative, maybe even literal, but I'm focusing on figurative. So as an example, a couple years ago, Doug Lane tells this story. His son at University of Oregon, they did a really important demonstration at a meeting of administrators to protest tuition hikes. It's like one of the most important things students could protest about. And the administration cracked down hard. Like, we're going to kick you out of school type of hard, right? Now,
Right.
Their response was, to a lot of the organizers, their response was not to, call the press, dig in their heels, not only are we right about this issue, now we're literally getting threatened to have our lives seriously materially harmed for exercising our rights. Some not insignificant number of people pivoted to, well, there are these like anti-abortion protesters who don't get in trouble for their protests on campus, and if we're going to get in trouble, they should get in trouble. Like, disaster, right? Like, the administration's going, sure, we would be happy to police and monitor and control as many students as possible, right? And again, obviously, right. I'm trusting people in the audience to understand, and it's annoying that I even have to say this, but I know that there's always like the, people who are like intentionally not going to understand things or are literalists. This obviously is not an embrace of anti-choice politics in any way, shape, or form. It was to say that pivot is a big problem, to not go on like, wait a second, we're staying exactly on this issue and you're not going to suppress us, to, well, why aren't these other students getting into trouble? Like this kind of like tattletale right. self-policing thing. And I think that is a big,
it's like, why didn't the police shoot the white woman with the rock?
We don't want the police to shoot anybody. Precisely. That's the liberatory argument.
And it was wrong that they shot the black person in the first place. So don't distract us with this argument of the white women with the rock.
Well,
right?
and there is totally, by the way, there's absolutely a tendency I could see in certain sectors of criminal justice reform where they'll say, like, you know what, you're totally right about this. There are these really unfair racial and structural disparities, and our answer is going to be we're going to incarcerate even more people to even out the stats. Not we're going to get rid of this system that is horrible, full stop, and obviously disproportionately affects people of color. Exactly. So I think that's a that's a really big problem. I had one other point, but I guess I'll just sort of leave it there. I think, and I guess it's sort of attached to the third point is I do think at times, I definitely think that there are some people. Okay, I think let me make a distinction. I think Milo, because Milo is, as far as I understand it, was specifically promising to dox and expose people who were transgender on his tour in a way that could jeopardize their well-being. So stopping that is a fundamentally different thing because you're protecting somebody's well-being, right? So that takes on a completely different equation. Ben Shapiro being a little smug asshole at your campus, I would say if Ben Shapiro had been primarily ignored or people had gone to his appearances and just been cool, calm, and collected and mocked him, I don't think he would have half the career he has.
I mean, that's what happens in most of the times that he appears in places, though. Like, there's all these stories of they were expecting trouble at this speech. Somebody made a huge thread about this, and it turned out like no, nothing happened.
Well, not actual trouble, but look, there's enough material he's been given for 1 million montages to feed his brand. So on just
and
a
I
very
question
practical,
where a lot of that comes from, because I'll tell you,
right.
Michael, I helped organize one of the main demonstrations against him at Berkeley.
Right.
And what went down there was the positive you were just describing.
Okay.
And anyone that got there and was complete, would do the things that we would be embarrassed or shudder from or understand could be used against us would have been squashed instantly. And
then that's just his team.
It really was
creating
great
propaganda
and speeches and people from the old civil rights movement that were talking.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's his team creating propaganda. Yeah. Then I do think honestly in some of these.
So I guess in the end, man,
yeah.
I'm open to see the reality and the possibility that there could be the slippery slope with deplatform. I think what I'm asserting at this point is I just haven't seen it yet. And again, so with the It's Going Down versus alt-right model, It's Going Down didn't do things that then got the attention of Patreon.
Haven't Antifada accounts been removed from Patreon? I mean, isn't that excuse me.
Yeah, and listen,
I hope
that's
the
the problem.
No, I hope not to. I don't want to put that out to the universe. This
gets to your argument about not trusting the business that's running this stuff. Because the distinction being, I'm hoping, I guess, which is maybe, kind of misguided, that they would understand, okay, look, you brought down It's Going Down because of lies. You brought down Sargon because of things he actually did.
I think
that there's something in that argument.
I don't think so. I think you're not going to. I would never depend on a Silicon Valley company making adjudications like that, and I think ever.
Well, no, I think what I'm depending on is I'm not seeing any reason I should stop supporting the deplatforming of fascism. I'm not seeing.
I mean, look, all I'm saying is that
if I see that
that's the new game
to a leftist side, it would be different.
You know what the real play might end up being is that we are going to, on some of these platforms that aren't totally monopolized, there might end up being a left-wing Patreon and a fascist Patreon, and we're going to have to migrate into these different business models.
They already have Hatreon, don't they?
I think so.
Yeah, but those things are always going to run into trouble with payment providers and stuff.
Well,
you fundamentally need to run on
some
sort of infrastructure.
Well, that's actually right, and I think that's maybe right. That's a more... What I'm saying, though, is if you have two different platforms that say, like, okay, we are providing for different types of politics, then and that's also scary too, frankly. But I think like a payment platform, because of the way their business is run, is going to be more likely to basically be saying like they stopped processing Gavin McInnes stuff because they're scared that there's even a 1% chance that there's organized criminal activity going on. That's not because of somebody giving an interview. So that already becomes a completely different metric that you're measuring by. So but as long as these things are in the hands of like a Patreon, no, I don't think it's a smart strategy.
This is the problem. This is
Yeah.
why I always try to move this conversation onto monopoly, because I don't think
Right.
you can win on actually having this conversation outside of it. Because if there was no monopoly, I would take my business to a left-wing platform that balances this correctly, right? Like it ices out the fascists and is favorable to left-wingers. I think I could run a Patreon like that fairly well now if you wanted to, but I'm not in charge of Patreon. And the other thing people need to realize with Patreon and the Sargon stuff is they realize and they're conscious about the fact that they're not just monetizing the content that gets put on Patreon, right? Somebody could subscribe to Literary Hangover if they just liked what I do on this show. And they would never even have to listen to the...
Well, they said that in their statement.
Right, and that's...
They basically said, like, look, we check out, especially what our top performers do on different platforms.
And that was always going to happen, and that's
Yes.
going to be an increasing site of risk. And I mean, the problem is, I think that continuing to encouraging these things will lead so like left wing things get cut too.
100%.
I think that's why the right wing likes to play the like. Well, if you're going to let us in, then or if you're going to let them in, then you have to let us in. And if you're going to let us out, we're going to make a hassle out of this XXX
And
example.
there's always going to be, for the foreseeable future, as we work to change it, there's going to be a structural advantage on the right in those dynamics.
Yeah, and I think, I think I understand what he's saying about now. Like, I think Sargon and Milo, like, yeah, fuck them. But I am genuinely, like, I don't want to pour any more gas on the fire as far as that goes.
I don't think it's a wise strategy. And I even think, whatever. I think we can also, frankly, if you want to, you can also parse. I think Milo is in some ways a very easy one to parse, even in his tours, because he was specifically talking about doing an actionable thing to students, as far as I understand. And it already becomes a totally different thing than, frankly, even somebody like Sargon. The guy's a fucking jackass. Like, take him on. Use them as an example to undermine the brand. It's so easy.
Yeah, but if I ran a company like Patreon,
look, that's
I would
the
kick them off
marketplace
too.
of ideas thing. And here's
you
my
would.
issue
Of course
with the
you would,
marketplace of ideas will
it's
win.
a business. Because it's a business, and
Right.
and I agree with you. But that's not a durable strategy. But as soon as they've dumped enough money to make it so that enough PragerU videos have been taken literally by enough people that even saying the word socialism is going to lead to, China, a cultural revolution that's going to kill people. Like, you as a business will go away from any controversy. You as a business, until the backlash to what happened to Sam became so unbelievably overwhelming, your first instinct would be, you know what? I don't understand all of this. It's too complicated. I get that, this guy is of uncredible source, but the tweet's controversial. You know what? I don't want to deal with it. That's what businesses do.
But I'm also
someone with a smaller platform could have been destroyed by that.
Dude, if someone, there is no doubt that somebody with a smaller platform would have been destroyed by that. Most people, if that happened to somebody with a smaller platform, they would not have every single entertainment figure and pundit.
If it happened to somebody who hadn't been platforming a lot of different journalists at a lot of different major publications and media.
100%. So as long as we're in the market game, it's not a smart play.
I guess
that's my view.
The point.
Can I say what I think about this too? Sure.
With the monopolization thing, I'm saying, like, if we weren't in this context of monopolization and I was just running a Patreon, I would still kick off Sargon for explicitly his political beliefs, and I wouldn't run somebody who speaks like that.
But you would be setting a different company up, which is what we're talking about, which is like, I want my Patreon is committed to socialist, anarchist, cool content.
Exactly.
You're some weird, fucking bigoted idiot from Britain. No, thank you.
So you talk about monopolization instead, right?
Sure. And that's the monopolization and innovation. Right. There you go.
Yeah. I agree with some of what you guys have said and disagree with other parts of it. I do think it speaks to the need for real left-wing platforms, because I also do not trust Patreon or any evil tech company really to adjudicate these things. I also agree that we need to pick our battles and be smart about it and know where to draw the line between a real fascist who poses either clear and present danger to people or like just spreading a violent ideology that leads very directly to violence, like we've seen with the Proud Boys, who have actually put people in the hospital fairly recently. And know when you're just playing into people's hands and when you're not. But like, okay, I used to be much more of a free speech absolutist than I am right now. But over time, like as I've gotten more and more information about this stuff, I've kind of changed my mind. Because first of all, like if you provide a neutral platform, we're not on equal footing in the marketplace of ideas, right? Some ideas have a lot more money and power behind them than others. So if I don't think any platform is truly going to be neutral, and I do think they have the responsibility to at least try to be smart about who they're featuring and who they're not. And like, we got to use all the tools in our toolbox, you know? And I used to think that deplatforming and protesting people was pointless because it didn't work. But I've seen it work a bunch of times. Like it really hurt Alex Jones. It really hurt Mike Cernovich, Gavin McInnes. Like they're pissed off about it. And fewer people are being polluted with their white nationalist garbage as a result. Also, there's no rule, there's no law that says the right and the left have to be treated equally, right? So like the slippery slope argument where, oh, it would be so easy once you set this precedent to use it against the left, that there's no equivalence there.
But which side's capital?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about more. I'm talking in terms of power. Obviously, it's going to be used against the left. I mean, it already is. And in fact, a more practical. Just to add to this, because we always talk about like the easy ones, okay? But on Facebook, in response to a lot of pushes on these issues, okay, Alex Jones, Gavin McInnes, massive impacts on websites like Brazil Wire. The Atlantic Council, which is a center-right to neocon think tank, is advising Facebook on Latin America content and on foreign policy. And it's already had a massive impact on independent adversarial journalism on U.S. foreign policy. And there is absolutely, not only is it going to favor the right in terms of where capitals will go, it is, I mean, that's not even slippery slope. It already is, barring a couple of top line personalities that we all focus on. The structural creep of what already is getting flattened and moved out of the discourse is on the left. And that's for obvious reasons that, of course, capital will favor the right. So I just think, like, look, it's both a bad play because of the context we're in. And I also think we shouldn't lose sight too of, you know, the other facets of this as well, which is that like these people can be out and we can defeat them and beat them, and we don't have to kind of play that cop hall monitor role.
Here's the thing though. They're going to do that to the left no matter what the left does
I don't
to the
know.
right.
I don't know about that.
They are.
Well,
they do and they will.
But what's
and
the evidence for that? Like, we have actual evidence of how these things are working. We need to respond to like what the actual evidence is versus like you could be right, but that's not what the reality is now. So the reality, I feel like
you don't think that they would keep trying to deplatform It's Going Down if the left stopped trying to deplatform Gavin McInnes, because I think they absolutely would.
It's possible.
And one thing
but
about
what
the right
is
that is smart is they use absolutely every tool in their toolbox, and they don't have conversations like this unless it's in a totally disingenuous way that only benefits themselves.
I guess the problem is you're sharpening the tools for them.
Right. You're giving them a tool.
I don't agree.
They have more tools. They have more advantages. And your hand, like, again, we don't operate in an idealized world. I'm having the conversation as if it's already baked in that they have structural advantages.
I think
that's a given.
I think they invented this and the left has picked it up, because the vast majority of instances where people have been harassed, deplatformed, forced to leave their jobs, it's been for expressing left-wing views.
I mean, my worry and I think the examples of Sargon and Gavin and Milo being deplatformed, like, I think it has damaged their careers and probably
definitely
minimized their ability to damage society. But I worry that the availability of those case studies is overshadowing things like the Crimes of Britain accounts that get shut down,
Right.
or the
No,
Telesur getting
the Telesur. I mean, it's the classic, like, the headlines tell, like, look at these companies, they're cracking down on the alt-right, but the structural instruments that are being put into place, from the Google algorithm searches to Facebook, certainly Twitter accounts. In fact, Twitter accounts still are, there's satiric left-wing personalities that have been banned, and Richard Spencer is still on. So the top line is that even in this, like, it's already being lost on the left. So maybe the most practical answer is, and, like, there's conversations that people are having about this that maybe will come out down the road, is really just being like, there needs to be, at least on, like, the Patreon level, some type of explicitly left platform.
Absolutely.
I agree
with that too. And here's
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
And if you have these sort of different, Patreon sort of services or personal services, they're not normalized by being on the same platform as everybody else. So it's like, oh, come on, this was how Milo got as far as he did. It's like, oh, he's just, he's not that bad. And look, he's on this thing and he's talking on that thing and he's on. We're sharing this space with them. If people have to go to the place that says, like, in their mission statement, we're totally good with neo-Nazis and liars, then people know that going on.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And I also just want to say, too, that another reason that Milo got really punctured was because of also just like that BuzzFeed report on Milo is, I mean, there was the comment that people dug up, the pedophilia thing, which I don't remember, but that was one. And to be honest with you, my read on that was that he was already on the way out anyways.
That was a Dean scream.
Yeah, they would have run interference for him, because that's exactly the type of comment that he would make and say, like, ooh, I was just joking, get away with. So I don't know about that. But the BuzzFeed report that actually was like, all right, this isn't speculative. Like, this is the pipeline. This is the piece in Breitbart. This is how they would advise, like, actual active white nationalists. This is how it gets reframed and laundered for, that was devastating, because it shut down a whole spectrum of the conduit bullshit conversations from people like Dave Rubin, who'd be like, oh, just ideas. And then it was like, okay, this is the actual idea process. And that was, that was frankly just journalism and analysis. I think that really pinned them.
No, and it destroyed their entire sort of finely tuned dog whistle narrative.
Exactly.
That was so careful to not be racist and fascist and bigoted. But, you just scrape the surface a little bit, and it just ripped the whole thing off. And it had, a total ripple effect, because now we can apply that rubric to other people. Look, his rhetoric is exactly the same things that Milo was saying. So obviously he's, that's what Sargon's whole shtick. He was recently, I heard him on a Kevin Logan podcast, and they ripped him apart, calling him names, tore his argument apart repeatedly, and were totally disrespectful to him.
Nice.
It was really fun.
Sounds like other people are following my lead into how to debate.
Well, sure. Well, but he came away from it like he took all the jabs, all the gender-specific name-calling at him and all this stuff, and came away like, I can take it because I'm in the marketplace of ideas. So it was like, it was fun to watch him just get ripped apart, but he just laughed it off.
Right.
And so that's, again, where that BuzzFeed article is so important, because he's not an honest actor. Sargon isn't debating issues. Give me a fucking break.
100%.
I'll use this issue to sell
100%.
this other lie.
And for what it's worth, and this is where it's the last thing I'll say, I think where there's value in defending, like, the actual liberal bougie values that anybody who I think is just even contextually honest, like, if you're, in your early 30s in the United States of America, even in a radically changed political situation, you're going to want to preserve some of these things that we call bourgeois or whatever the hell. And frankly, I think for what it's worth, the Milo case is actually an example of the most potent thing that really destroyed him was aggressive, smart, First Amendment-enabled investigative journalism. And that's when he was totally destroyed. That was when the book company dropped his book, and now he's a joke. So great.
I don't know. I feel like these liberal media platforms who still think that they can be neutral and provide an equal amount of time to these people, they need to wake up, because throughout history, we've seen fascists do not respect their liberal values, and they're going to use any platform they're given against them.
No doubt. Richard Spencer, we played a clip of him a year and a half ago. He said, we'll use it, and then we get in power, we get rid of the First Amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
he doesn't care about free speech.
Of course
and
not.
I realized
I do.
Yeah. And I realized that most of these companies are more likely to break for the right than the left when push comes to shove, but they should be a little smarter than that about it, because the fascists are not on their side.
Well, I, unlike you, as a socialist versus anarchist, I have no trust in the companies having that intelligence.
I'm not a full anarchist. I'm a communist with anarchist leanings.
Just an update on the IDW Patreon exodus, though.
Right. They're not doing it.
Well, Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin are still on Patreon.
Hell yeah, of course they are. We actually need to think really seriously about this, because I'm actually making stupid money.
What am I supposed to do? You mean maybe we should have had the replacement set up, guys?
So there's a really interesting question, which is, so Sargon does an interview, and it's time to do an exile, but
Carl Jung was with Ezra Pound and Alan Dulles in Switzerland once, and they were like, we just have $30,000 coming in a month. Should we just walk away from that?
Yeah, and of course the answer is no. I mean, that would be chaos. So what do you do?
Is you socialists?
I mean, Sam Harris gets to shut down his Patreon because he's literally like, I mean, this is material interest, okay? I have look, Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson definitely make more money than they should make in my estimation, but they are not trust fund babies as far as I understand. Sam Harris can do the Patreon flourish because he is literally like Scrooge McDucking in Golden Girls money. Okay, like he can do that little play. Dave Rubin, I mean, I'm sure he gets plenty of, corporate money, but I think he does have actual patrons, and part of his budget is actually like, oh, I need this.
He's got 3,200 patrons.
Yeah, so that's real.
I also find it telling that the thing that really turned the right against Milo was him talking, granted in a very flippant way, about something that I've heard a lot of my gay male friends talk about, which was, oh yeah, my first sexual experience was with an older dude. And, maybe that was a little creepy on his part, but I feel okay about it. And this is a thing. And conservatives were like, oh, no, we can't have that. Because I knew at the end of the day, they were going to reject him for being gay, not for being a fascist or whatever.
I didn't follow that story very much, but I do recall, to echo what you're saying, that when I heard that clip, it was like, yes, it was like, first of all, if you had friends like that are gay men, it wasn't such an entirely shocking thing to hear necessarily. And it was also like, there were some things he said around it, as I recall, that were actually really gross, that weren't just that. But I do remember being like, this dude said like literally hundreds of things that are worse than this.
It came off to me like him joking about his childhood sexual assault, like almost to feel better about it.
Yeah. It was probably one of course, on the alt-right, the most like humanizing, potentially controversial thing you'd say would be what would get you. What is it?
I've got 7,451 patrons.
A lot of patrons, so yeah. Maybe if Sargon ate less French fries, he would be in a different shape. Oh wow. What is it?
A different comedy podcast has 9,000 something.
Oh, nice. All right. Patreon.com/TMBS.